In this episode, I am on the road as I am spending the week covering the annual CinemaCon Expo in Las Vegas, but it's a new set with the same great conversation, so enjoy Hero Blend number 10. Hey everyone, welcome back. I am here in Las Vegas. This week, my guest host is Joe McCabe, West Coast editor from SFX Magazine. How's it going, man?
Going well.
So we are here in Vegas at CinemaCon, and we just got out of the Sony presentation, and as you can tell from my fancy new hat, we just got to see a huge chunk of Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think it was about half an hour of footage.
Yeah, like 33 minutes or something.
Yeah, this is for a 2-hour film, I guess that's about 25% of the film, so that's a significant portion. Yeah. We got to see 3 different sequences. I think Joe and I both had kind of different reactions to it. We both liked some stuff about it, both didn't like some stuff about it. So let's jump into it, shall we? So the first thing I do want to talk about, because it's a big part of this footage, is the action. We get to see, the first scene that we saw has Spider-Man chasing Rhino, played by Paul Giamatti, through the streets of Manhattan, and we got to see the Times Square sequence with Electro, which is his first real introduction into the movie in Times Square. So Joe, what did you think about the action that we saw tonight?
Well, for the Rhino sequence, it was weird because I think that's a tough sequence to show outside the film, because without any background on the Paul Giamatti character, he kind of just looks like some ranting, random, crazy dude driving a truck.
Well, honestly, I almost kind of like that to a certain degree, because, I mean, in the comics, you have villains that kind of just show up, and they're like these super villains that just randomly, they're battling Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, so I think that almost works to a certain degree as well, and you're also going to have this character show up later in the film.
Yeah.
But, let's talk about, the actual physical, the cinematography, the shooting of the action.
Right.
What do you think of Marc Webb's approach?
I think he's improved as an action director. In the first film, I don't know if he directed an action film before?
No, his first film was 500 Days of Summer, this was Amazing Spider-Man was his first real big action.
And my initial reaction to him being assigned the job of director on the first Amazing Spider-Man was like, it's like we're living in this age where the philosophy is any actor can be an action hero and any director can be an action director. And I was a little bit kind of put off by that.
Sure.
But I do believe that it's easier for a director of a romantic comedy to direct an action film, or a superhero film especially, because superhero films are no less realistic than most romantic comedies.
Okay.
They're both wish fulfillment, they're both escapism, and it's really just a question, I think, of telling the story and knowing where to place the camera. I mean, you might not be, the greatest, superhero film director of all time, but as I think we saw with Jon Favreau, you can
fit the job. Sure,
you can tell a linear story, and you can make people care about your characters.
And I think we're also seeing the same thing with Joe and Anthony Russo doing Captain America.
Sure.
It's definitely. So let's also talk about the Times Square sequence, because this is Electro is obviously a new villain. He's got a whole new power set that we haven't seen in superhero movies before.
Yeah.
How did you like the presentation of him? How did you like the look of his powers?
The Times Square sequence was actually a lot better for me than the Rhino Paul Giamatti sequence. It walked this sort of delicate balance between the interpersonal stuff and the action stuff, because it comes right after this extended romantic comedy sequence with Emma Stone and
basically to give you some kind of fill in the gaps here. The sequence, the Times Square action sequence, comes after Peter and Gwen have reunited after being a year apart. They kind of have this funny little back and forth, and then Peter has to go basically save Manhattan once again from Electro. But honestly,
can we talk about that now, or are we still focused on the action?
You know what? Yeah, let's actually. I think that actually is a good segue into it, because I think that one of the strongest things about Amazing Spider-Man was that relationship between Peter and Gwen.
Yeah.
Obviously Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, I think, are both immensely talented actors. I think they're incredibly charismatic, and I think they have fantastic chemistry together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously being a couple in real life, they've transferred that to the screen. I think in what we saw tonight, though, I like them both more than I did in the first Amazing Spider-Man. I found myself kind of rooting for them more than I did in the first film.
What do you think changed?
Part partly it's just because in the first film there was so much hype about their off-screen relationship.
Okay.
And, I shouldn't let things like that affect me, but inevitably it does.
No, honestly, I mean, that is something about celebrity. It actually kind of affects it. I mean, that's something I agree.
Where it's just like, oh, man, all right, I get it, they're in love, but I'll decide whether they have chemistry on screen or not. You're not going to tell me that. I always have this natural,
version to it, sure.
But, gotta admit, they were in this scene, it was pretty terrific. There was a natural chemistry. I don't know if they're still a couple in real life. Are they? I don't keep up with that sort of thing.
Same.
But man, it was like they really responded to one another,
totally.
And the script was tight.
Yeah, and honestly,
and it was charming, and it was
And there is a change in the dynamic in their relationship because obviously Gwen Stacy's father died and basically told Spider-Man, "Stay away from my daughter. You're only going to get her in trouble." Yeah. So that creates an interesting clash between the two. Yeah. Obviously, they are not handling it very well because they clearly still care for each other. Yeah. But it really comes through in their performance, and I think it looks fantastic. Yeah. Now I actually do also want to talk about the comedy because that's another thing that I think was highlighted in this, particularly in the to get back to the Rhino sequence. You have multiple shots of kind of Spider-Man knocking on while Rhino's driving this huge truck through Manhattan, kind of knocking on the door, saying, "Roll down the window, please." And it's like, "Hey, how's it going?" Right. And I think. Amazing Spider-Man, I think, improved the humor over the Raimi trilogy.
It definitely, it made that concerted effort to bring the wisecracking wall crawler that we know from the comics to the screen, whereas I guess with Tobey Maguire's films, there were a couple little random quips here and there, but
that wasn't
the focus. Not the emphasis at all. So, the one thing I will say that I still have somewhat reservations about is Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man voice. Okay. Because in the first film, I kind of felt like I was listening to, sounds terrible in a way, but I was listening to a British actor do the one New York voice that everyone knows, and that's like De Niro. Sure. And he's still doing it in this, but it doesn't bother me as much. And maybe it's like the same thing with Christian Bale's Batman voice. Like, you just get used to it. If you can just get past that, it's like, okay, fine. And honestly, it's consistent.
I honestly think that maybe a little bit kind of emphasizing it is the fact that this is a more humorous Spider-Man. He's kind of allowed to have a little bit of a more silly voice. I think that's allowed. Let's also talk. I think we should also definitely talk a bit more about the final scene that we saw, which is this great scene between Electro and Harry Osborn, who's played by Dane DeHaan. Basically, in the scene,
it looks so much as we were watching. I was just like, "Oh my god!" It's like were they trying to find a new Leonardo DiCaprio in terms of appearance?
Dane DeHaan, I definitely see that, but
it's like Skeet Ulrich to Johnny Depp is this guy to Leo DiCaprio.
Hey, but man, the dude has the talent. I'm very excited to see it.
Yeah, he's a good actor.
But just to kind of describe the scene a little bit, it's after the Times Square sequence, after Electro has been locked up in the Ravencroft Institute. Apparently, Harry, there's been some kind of power struggle at Oscorp where he's been kicked out. So now these two characters are kind of getting ready to team up, and just kind of seeing the interaction between the two characters. I'm very excited to see, and obviously where this franchise is going is Sinister Six. It's these team up these villains, and I think they're off to a great start in that respect.
Yeah, I like that beginning of their relationship. It was reminiscent in some ways of a kind of like a Bride of Frankenstein thing almost.
Yeah, definitely.
The monster is befriending Dr. Pretorius because he's been rejected by everybody, and it's like, friend and that kind of, that worked for me. It was a lot better than Spider-Man 3's Venom and Sandman.
Yes,
let's team up just for the hell of it.
Because that's what movies are supposed to do.
Right.
But and also, I think that also what's kind of driving it is this very palpable mutual need between these characters. Harry, we only got to see one scene of Harry, but he is obviously extremely distressed about his position at Oscorp, while Electro is kind of being painted as this character who feels the desperate need to be this want to be needed by society, and the fact that Harry needs his help as much as he does, and the fact that Electro can help Harry kind of get back into Oscorp. I think that is a very interesting dynamic that I think is going to play really well.
Yeah, it's true.
So let's hear it. Final thoughts, man.
Well, did you want to talk any more about that action sequence that we saw in Times Square?
Yeah, okay, let's do that. Let's not rush it.
Well, the thing that I thought was cool about that was that initially these, the posters and the ads we've been seeing with Electro, I have mixed feelings about them because it's kind of like, hey, he's fighting a guy in a hoodie.
Sure.
And it's like, but I totally get that, the original Electro's costume from the comics is one of the most outlandish comic costumes.
Yes, it's these big lightning bolts off the face, it's green bodysuit.
Barely transfer to, a Saturday morning cartoon, let alone, film. The cool thing, though, is that they make his powers seem like a good match for Spider-Man's in a way. Partly, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but I like the idea that, like, Spider-Man is kind of, on a certain level, he's a creature of energy. Because this,
of course, he's jumping around.
And Electro is, pure
energy, absolutely.
So that's kind of neat in a way, and it's like he's definitely out of his element. He's not fighting an antagonist who also has, like, animal-based power. Like that.
Well, apparently he is turned into Electro using electric eels, but I think that's besides the point.
But that's what, but so is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Yes, exactly.
In the Brownhouse version.
But I think also, just kind of to that point, there's also a scene in the action. In the action, we see Electro's bolts kind of take out one of Spider-Man's one of the web things. Which, if you go back to Raimi's trilogy, that wouldn't have happened because he had the organic webbing. So, like, that creates an interesting that position for Spider-Man.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. You're right. Yeah.
I think that's really cool. I'm excited. I mean, Electro is a character that is, I think, he's there because he's going to pop on screen. This is a character who, like you said, is made of pure energy. You couldn't really do a character like this back when, say, the first Spider-Man, which, if you look at the CGI now, has not aged terribly great. But now,
even at the time, I think we were still a little bit like.
And then obviously there was also the Green Goblin problem.
Yeah.
But even that was a practical effect.
Right.
But I think that the visual effects in the film look fantastic. We got to see not only Electro's kind of firing off the electric bolts, but also in the Harry Osborn scene in Ravencroft, we get to see him kind of teleport a bit. And I think it looks pretty cool. It's almost a little bit of a Dr. Manhattan-esque from Watchmen.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I like that they don't overdo it too, because that was one of the things that kind of threw me about the first Amazing Spider-Man. Like, I felt like Spider-Man is, as a superhero, his powers and his persona are very intimate in a way. It's not like Avengers or even Iron Man for that matter, where it's pretty epic. You can have wars, you can be transcontinental, Atlantic, whatever. He's a guy who swings through the skyscrapers in New York
City.
Is a New Yorker to the core. And in the first film, there was so much CGI, I thought, with the lizard, and those sequences were so, like, they were so quick that I almost felt it was like a little bit more than Spider-Man, the idea of Spider-Man could withstand.
Yeah.
It just felt like, I don't know how to explain it, but maybe it's partly because Webb has been short as an action director, maybe it's just because they had a better script or better choreography, but I felt like it was like, you could have, because they could have gone nuts. I mean, they could have had Electro just like random explosions here and there and there.
Sure.
But it's like, it was fairly well choreographed. It was like, it was like, okay, these are the game rules, metal, rubber, he has one web shooter, blah, blah, blah.
And also a great awareness of his surroundings also.
Yeah.
We get to see a lot of kind of slow motion, kind of moving around, kind of Spidey's, the spider sense kind of giving him this wider perspective.
That's the new thing too, where you're seeing things from his point of view.
Which I thought was extremely well done. So, Joe, let's look at it this way. Going into this footage, how did you feel about Amazing Spider-Man 2? And now that you've seen this footage, how do you feel now?
Actually, going into the footage, I didn't really... I didn't hate the first Amazing Spider-Man, but I didn't come out of it like dying to see that second one.
Sure.
And the initial ads with this film, they hadn't really won me over, but the footage was pretty good.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to see what happens next. I mean, there's still this part of me that's always a little reluctant when even with 33 minutes of footage to have too many strong feelings, because like
this is the footage that they want us to see. It's worth mentioning.
It's the stuff they're proudest of, and I remember back with Spider-Man 3, they showed like 45 minutes, and everybody came out thinking it was going to be the best Spider-Man of all, and but. And even in this case, it's like, okay, Harry, I get his motivation, that makes sense, I don't know how Norman Osborn fits in that equation, and like hopefully that end of it is equally strong. Because right now, the thing with Harry, especially, it works, I think, is that they don't make him. It doesn't feel like he's becoming evil because he has to be.
Exactly.
Says he has to. He's being thrown out of Oscorp.
Yeah, there's real motivation there.
Right, so it's not just like James Franco's character in the Spider-Man films, where he's kind of just like ranting because he's just like this spoiled...
Yeah, because he had to lose it. I mean, he lost... I mean, in the original Spider-Man trilogy, it was a like 3-movie arc that really probably could have been taken care of one movie, and it seems he's kind of doing it here.
Yeah,
and I agree. Amazing Spider-Man, I was kind of neutral on a little bit. I think that it did a good job setting up its own universe universe, but it didn't have, it was kind of missing out on a little bit of originality. I am now, I would say, excited for Spider-Man 2, so I think it's going to be good times. Thanks for joining me, Joe, and hopefully I'll have you back on the show, man.
Oh yeah, by all means, man.